Hello and welcome to Special Collections at the Royal College of Art. My name is Neil Parkinson and I'm the Archives and Collections Manager. And today I'm going to be showing you some of the posters from our extraordinary poster collection, particularly relating to the RCA Film Society, which was a student-run society showing all kinds of classics from repertory cinema from the late 1940s up to the 1980s. And typically what would happen is students, particularly graphic design students, would be tasked with designing a poster to draw people to the screening. And they would really use it as an opportunity to experiment, to come up with a really unique take on classic films and push the envelope with color, typography, and just sort of attention-grabbing advertising. This is a photograph of the space in the early 1960s when the Junior Common Room was on Cromwell Road, just opposite the Natural History Museum. And you can see the screen there where the films were projected. And this was basically sort of two rooms converted into one to make this astonishing space for viewing. And apparently screenings were very rowdy. There was a lot of sort of stamping and cheering every time the reels were changed. It was a very boozy, smoky atmosphere, but it was definitely the heart of the kind of social life of the students at the time. Here are a couple of posters for the Film Society itself, basically a program of coming attractions for that particular year. So here's one for 1961 and 1962. And it's a really eclectic range of films, a lot of international cinema, a lot of European cinema, Japanese cinema. The Society was founded really so that students would have an opportunity to see films that they knew existed but couldn't see any other way. So there's things like An American in Paris, there's the Marx Brothers, A Night at the Opera, The Man with the Golden Arm, and quite often they're paired with popular serials or sort of just quirky shorts. You can see here, for instance, Gunfight at the OK Corral is paired with Victorian Lady in Her Boudoir. This is the program for the Film Society from 1962 to 1963. It's a lot of what we think of as art house films, a lot of European cinema, Japanese cinema, and so on. There's all kinds of things like Bergman's Summer with Monica, but then something much more mainstream like Hitchcock's North by Northwest. Also a lot of Kurosawa. There's a whole sort of Kurosawa season going on here. He was an incredibly popular director and students flocked to those screenings. So students had to show their initiative in how they designed the posters, making use, as always, of limited resources. For this film about the Warsaw Uprising, Brian Haynes used images of broken up car batteries to represent the kind of damaged landscape of Warsaw. And you can see we've got it in two different formats, two different colorways and two different paper stocks. So there's this sort of matte photo litho version, and then there's this sort of shiny one where you can barely read the title of the film. And that was quite a common motif in a lot of the film posters. It's actually often quite hard to work out what film is being advertised because the students' designs would be quite opaque. So this poster for the Western 310 to Yuma is on quite cheap sort of coloured paper. Very sort of simple screen printing, but just to add an interesting quirk, the designer has punched some holes in this panel to fit with the theme of the Western gunfight theme. And here it is in a different colorway, where they got a bit more carried away with the hole punch. Because it was repertory films, quite often the same film would come round again and again, separated by several years. So what's really interesting for us to see is how subsequent cohorts of students reinterpreted the same film. So here's a version of Singin in the Rain, again done on this kind of cheap, shiny paper in letterpress, very kind of abstract approach. And then a very different conceptual version where the sheet music has been made to look as if it's run in the rain. And you wouldn't really know this was a poster for a film unless you looked at it really closely and saw the date and time and location up at the very top there. Similarly, we've got two quite markedly different takes on Cocteau's Orphée. This is the poster for it from 1955, very kind of standard lithography of the time, the very kind of 1950s palette. And then it came back in 1968 with this sort of slightly psychologically angular and intense take, which looks like a completely different film. Some of the students went very high concept. So for Taste the Blood of Dracula, we've got a giant ketchup bottle. And for Candide, we've got some rose-tinted spectacles. It was sometimes a challenge for students to interpret really famous films where the iconography was sort of almost used up because it was so ubiquitous and familiar. So they tried to find ingenious ways of doing that. So here's quite a minimalist interpretation of North by Northwest, very, very bold orange color, and the typography is the machine gun fire from the biplane there. Sometimes they didn't even tell you what film was showing. You were just meant to work it out. This one's relatively straightforward. This is King Kong with a very diminished Kong at the bottom here. Again, this solid use of color, very eye-catching, even if you have to stop and think about what you're actually being sold. This is a particularly intriguing one for Psycho, with absolutely none of the visuals we might expect. There's no knife, there's no shower head. Instead, what we've got, and you can barely make it out, and you have to sort of think about what you're actually looking at, it's a keyhole cover with the details of the film in the hole there. It involves quite a lot of looking from the viewer to work out exactly what we're looking at and what's being advertised. So in that way, I suppose it taps into the film's themes of voyeurism. Quite a lot of the works reflect prevailing sort of design and aesthetic motifs of the time. So a lot of them relate to the pop art movement that was central to the college in the late 50s, early 60s. And this poster for Fellini's La Strada is very poppy and very much of the aesthetic of the time. As is often the case with the RCA film posters, there's sort of little Easter eggs. So if you look very, very closely, you can see the face of the lead actress hidden in the sun, and very kind of low contrast, orange and pink. And then finally, this poster for the Ipcress File is quite sort of fitting, really, because Len Dayton, who wrote the Ipcress File, was an RCA graphic design student in the 1950s and designed our student journal Arc, among other things. And the Ipcress File, the film from the 60s, eventually made it to the RCA Film Society, and one of the later graphic design students designed the poster for it. And also, appropriately enough, some of the scenes in the Ipcress File are filmed just outside the college Kensington campus here. So quite fitting and timely that the Ipcress File should have had a home in the poster collection.